6 years ago, my brother took the woman I planned to marry at Dad's funeral. He mocked me again until my wife stepped out of the limo and his smile vanished. My name is Ryan. I am 32 years old, and if there is one thing I learned the hard way, it is that nothing cuts deeper than betrayal when it comes from your own blood. 6 years ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I had just landed a solid job in IT security. I had saved enough for a down payment on a condo, and most importantly, I was in love. Her name was Elise. She was not flashy. She was not the loudest person in the room, but she had this calm presence that made you feel like the world could fall apart around you, and somehow, if she was beside you, you would still be standing. I had the ring, I had the speech, I even had the dinner reservation. And then my brother Drew swooped in like a vulture dressed in a slim-fit button-down, wearing that smug grin he always had whenever he thought he had won something. I still do not know exactly how it happened. All I know is that 1 week before I was going to propose, Elise pulled me aside and sat me down in the quietest corner of our favorite coffee shop. Her hands were wrapped around her cup, but she was not drinking. She could barely look at me. Then she told me she was confused. She said she felt something with someone else. When I asked her who it was, she hesitated just long enough for my stomach to drop. Then she whispered, Drew, my older brother, the golden child, the one who never missed a chance to point out that I was always one step behind. The one who could charm a room, suck all the air out of it, and then ask why no one else was breathing. Drew had always been louder than me, funnier than me, braver according to our parents. He was the one they looked at with pride, while I got the soft little pat on the shoulder and the words, well, as long as you're trying your best. I cannot say I was surprised that he tried something like that. I was surprised that she said yes. They moved in together 3 months later. I cut contact. I did not answer Drew's texts. I did not respond when Elise emailed me twice, asking if we could talk sometime. I did not go to their engagement party either, even though Mom tried to guilt trip me into it. Family is family, Ryan, she said. But all I heard was, your feelings do not matter as much as appearances. So I did what I always did. I shut down. I got quiet. I focused on work. I poured everything I had into my career. I stopped checking social media. I built walls so high that even I could not see over them anymore. And inside those walls, I found peace, or at least something that looked like it. Then, last week, Dad died. It was not sudden. He had been sick for a while. Lung cancer. We all knew where it was heading, but the finality of that phone call still hit like a train. I had not seen him in almost a year. Still, I cried alone in my apartment, while Drew posted photos of Dad from his hospital bed with long captions about cherishing every moment and the honor of being his son. I wanted to scream. Drew, who had not even visited last Christmas. Drew, who only started showing up again when he found out Dad had a sizable life insurance policy. The funeral was last Saturday. Black suits, gray skies. People I had not seen in years whispering into tissues. I arrived early and sat in the back. Quiet. I did not want attention. I did not want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to say goodbye. But of course, that was not in Drew's plan. He walked in 20 minutes late, hand in hand with Elise. She was wearing black, but it was the kind of black that clung to her like it had been chosen for attention, not grief. Drew looked like he was walking a red carpet instead of stepping into a church. He saw me almost immediately. I could feel his eyes scanning the room until they landed on mine. Then he smirked. As he passed me in the aisle, loud enough for the people near us to hear, he said, "Some guys just finish first." I did not flinch. I did not blink. I just smiled. Then I said, "You still working that office job?" His smirk twitched slightly. He had not expected that. But that was not the real punch. Because just then, a sleek black limo pulled up outside the church, and the door opened. My wife stepped out. When Drew turned curious about who I was smiling at, he saw her, and I swear he nearly dropped Elisa's hand. The moment he saw her, his whole posture changed. His chest, which had been puffed out like a peacock's, deflated. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His jaw hung open just long enough for Elise to notice. She followed his gaze, confused, until her eyes landed on my wife. Sabrina, elegant, composed. The kind of woman who did not need to raise her voice to own a room. She stepped out of the limo in heels that click like punctuation marks, wearing a tailored navy coat that stopped just above her knees, and sunglasses that did not quite hide the sharp focus in her eyes. She was not flashy. She was the kind of woman who made flash irrelevant. She walked over to me with the same calm presence Elise used to have, only now I could finally see the difference. Sabrina did not borrow grace. She carried. She took my hand and kissed my cheek, and for one strange moment, I forgot we were standing outside a funeral. The air between us did not just shift, it changed ownership. Drew blinked like he was seeing a ghost. Elise's expression twisted, not with jealousy, but with something worse. Regret. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Drew mouthed it under his breath, barely audible. Is that Sabrina DeWitt? Yes. The same Sabrina DeWitt who had once been on the cover of Forbes 30 Under 30. The same woman who spoke at 3 tech conferences a year had started her own company from scratch and whose client list included half the Fortune 500. And the same woman who, unlike Elise, actually saw me. She liked me when I was quiet. She did not need me to perform in order to be enough. But I did not say a word. I just turned back toward the altar with her hand in mine. The ceremony began, and I could feel Drew's eyes burning into the back of my head the entire time. He was unraveling, and I did not have to lift a finger. But that was not the moment things truly shifted. That came later, at the wake. The reception was held at my parents' old estate, a place that, to me, still smelled like burnt toast and disappointment. The house was full of mourners, and Drew was in his element. He shook hands, he laughed too loudly, he told stories about Dad like he had been his caretaker instead of a once-a-month visitor. Elise stayed glued to his side, occasionally tossing glances at Sabrina and me from across the room. At one point, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and found my mother there stirring something on the stove. She did not look up. "I saw who you brought," she said. I waited. She sighed deep and theatrical. "It's just, this isn't a competition, Ryan. It's your father's funeral." "I didn't make it a competition," I said calmly. "Drew did, 6 years ago." She turned around, then her eyes, sharp spoon still in hand. "You're still bitter about Elise. You were barely dating a year, and Drew loved her." I actually laughed. "I was going to propose. You knew that." She waved the spoon dismissively like she was batting away a fly. "You weren't ready. You never were. Always so cautious, so quiet. Drew goes after what he wants. Maybe you should have done the same." And just like that, I was 12 again, sitting at the dinner table while Drew got praised for making the soccer team and I got scolded for getting a B in math. I was 17, watching him get the keys to Dad's car, while I was told I was not responsible enough yet. I was 25, listening to Mom tell me that Elise was more Drew's type anyway, when I first told her what had happened. But I was not 12 anymore. I was not 17. I was not 25. I was 32, and I was done. So I said, "Thanks for the advice." Then I walked out. Later that evening, as the sky darkened and the crowd thinned, Drew cornered me on the back porch. His sleeves were rolled up, and he had a glass of something dark in his hand. Scotch, probably. The same kind Dad used to drink. He leaned on the railing next to me and did not speak right away. "So you really married her?" "Yeah," I said, sipping my water. "Crazy world," he scoffed. "You always were lucky." I turned to him. "No. You always thought charm and shortcuts were the same thing as work. That's not luck." He stared at me. "Come on, Ryan. I mean, Sabrina. DeWitt? Really?" I shrugged. "She saw something in me, I guess." "Yeah," he muttered bitterly. "Something with a lot of zeros in her bank account." That was when it hit me. He was not shocked I was with Sabrina because he thought I was not good enough. He was mad because she had always been out of his reach. And suddenly, Elise did not look so smug anymore. She looked like a consolation prize. Drew was about to say more, but then Mom called from inside. "Drew, the lawyer's here." He straightened fast, like a teenager being called to dinner. Ah, yes, the will. That was where things started to unravel. Not for me. I had already grieved my father. I had already built my own life. But Drew still believed he was the star of the show. He had no idea what Dad had really been planning these past few years. Before we got to the lawyer and the will reading, something else happened. Something small but explosive. Back inside, as people gathered around the sitting room, I saw Elise whisper something into Mom's ear. They both glanced at me. Then Mom turned and said, "Ryan, could I have a word in private?" I nodded and followed her into the hallway. She closed the door behind us. "Elise is worried that Sabrina might cause distractions. She's very high profile, you know." I stared at her. "You want her to leave, just for the reading?" It's family, Ryan. I almost laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. I said slowly. I used to think, maybe you just didn't understand how much your favoritism affected me. But now I see it clearly. You chose not to see it. Ryan, no. I cut, in my voice calm and low. You and Drew can have your little alliance, but Sabrina is my wife. She stays. I turned and walked away. That was when I noticed the lawyer at the front of the room. He was a man in a navy blazer, with a worn briefcase setting up his papers with quiet precision. And Drew was already in the front row, one arm around Elise, that smug grin creeping back onto his face. He had no idea what was coming. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the folder slowly, drawing everyone's attention. The room fell quiet, but there was tension in the air. Static, unspoken, almost ritualistic. I looked around the room, scanning faces I had not seen in years. Most of them had aged. Some had not changed at all. And Drew sat tall and confident, with one leg crossed and a drink in hand, like he was already calculating the numbers in his head. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for being here today. The lawyer said, his voice dry and practiced. Mr. Harold Whitmore's final wishes were very clearly outlined in this document, which he updated in full a year ago. At the mention of the will being updated, I saw Drew stiffen slightly. His fingers paused on the rim of his glass. He asked that I read the following aloud. The lawyer pulled out a smaller sheet of paper and began reading a personal message Dad had left behind. It was not poetic. It was not warm. It was matter of fact, the way Dad always was. To my family, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. I have no illusions that I was perfect, and I know I left many things unsaid, but I want my last actions to speak clearly. I have spent the last year watching more carefully than most of you know. I have seen who showed up and who did not, who gave with no expectations and who took with both hands. What I built will not go to waste. Not again. A few people shifted in their seats. Mom blinked hard, her lips pressed tight. Drew, however, gave a tiny smirk, like he thought Dad was talking about me. I felt Sabrina's hand gently rest on mine. The lawyer placed the paper down and lifted the actual will. Let's begin with the estate, he said. Mr. Whitmore's residence, valued at approximately $2.1 million, will be transferred to... Drew leaned forward slightly. Ryan Whitmore. You could have heard a fork drop. I did not move. I did not blink. My expression did not change. But inside, my heart skipped. Not from joy, from shock. Drew's head jerked toward me. What he blurted. The lawyer did not flinch. The primary residence, along with all its contents, belongs solely to Mr. Ryan Whitmore. That has to be a mistake, Mom said, her voice rising. Harold promised Drew the house years ago. There was a previous version of the will, the lawyer confirmed, but it was legally nullified and replaced. This version is final and notarized. Drew stood up, knocking over his glass. This is ridiculous. Dad said he told me. Please sit down, Mr. Whitmore. The lawyer interrupted, still calm. Drew did not sit. He was staring at me, now his face flushed. Elise reached for his arm, but he shook her off. What did you do, Ryan? What did you say to him? Nothing, I said evenly. Maybe he just saw things for what they were. But that was not the betrayal that came next. The lawyer continued down the list. Stocks, accounts, trust funds, some to me, some to charitable causes Dad had supported quietly over the years. Small things to extended family. And then the lawyer glanced down again. As for the remaining family business assets, including Whitmore Logistics and its 51% majority shares, these have been placed in a private family trust controlled by... He paused. Sabrina Whitmore. The air went still. Even I was caught off guard. Drew's eyes went wide. What her? Are you kidding me? She's not family. She is, I said quietly. My wife. The lawyer looked up. Mr. Harold Whitmore explicitly stated that he admired Mrs. Whitmore's business acumen and her vision for long-term sustainability. The trust ensures voting control over the company remains in her hands. Mr. Drew Whitmore retains no shares. That was the knife. But the twist came from the person none of us expected. Mom stood up. Harold would never do that, she snapped. He would never give it to her. Not over his own son. The lawyer calmly unfolded another letter. Mrs. Whitmore, there is a personal note addressed to you. Would you like me to read it? I don't care what it says, she barked, eyes burning. The lawyer read it anyway. To Margaret, you have spent the better part of 30 years telling me which son deserved more. I let you. I thought I was avoiding conflict, but I saw how you treated Ryan after Elise left him. I saw how little you believed in him. I stayed quiet when you tried to push Drew into the company, but I am done staying quiet. This company will go to the person who reminds me most of the man I once wanted to be. You may not like it. That is your burden to carry now." Silence fell, like someone had shut off the sound in the room. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Drew just stood there, his hands shaking. Elise was shrinking beside him, her eyes flicking between everyone like she wanted to disappear. And then Drew snapped. "You manipulated him," he said, pointing at me. "This is some twisted game. You think you've won, huh? Because you married some rich woman and kissed up to Dad on his deathbed?" I stood. "I didn't have to manipulate anyone," I said. "I just showed up." He moved toward me fast, too fast. But Sabrina stepped between us without hesitation, calm but firm. "Don't," she said, just that. But her voice could have stopped traffic. Drew glared at her, then at me. And for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me, not fear of Sabrina, fear of what he had lost, fear of what he never really had. He turned to Elise, expecting support, but she just stared at the floor. And that was when I knew he had no one left to blame but himself. But the real fallout had not even begun yet, because as the room emptied and the lawyer packed up his things, Sabrina leaned in and whispered something to me. And when I heard it, I almost dropped her hand. Sabrina did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her words were like a scalpel, precise, quiet, instantly sharp. "He tried to contact me," she whispered, "before the funeral, a week ago, through a mutual client." I did not react right away. I just kept my eyes on the half-empty room, watching Drew storm off toward the garage like a man looking for something to break. My throat tightened. "When?" "Last Friday," she said softly. "He asked our client to pass along his number to me. Said it was about a business proposal. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see what kind of move he was making first." And now, we knew. He had not just stolen the woman I loved years ago. He had not just paraded her in front of me at our father's funeral. He had not just mocked me with that smug little jab about finishing first. He was still trying to sink his claws into everything I had, even after everything that had already happened. And the worst part was that it still hurt. I thought I was past it. I thought marrying Sabrina, rebuilding my life, and watching Drew's smug smile finally crumble would be enough. But it was not, because somewhere deep down, part of me still wanted a brother. Part of me still wanted my mother to see me, just once, without measuring me against the shadow she had shaped Drew into. Later that night, I stood in my old childhood bedroom. It was empty now, stripped down. The posters and trophies were long gone. Just 4 beige walls and a small desk that still had a carved R+E in the corner. I must have done that when I was 13, back when I still believed love was permanent and families were forever. Sabrina had gone outside to take a call. I told her I needed a moment alone. That was when I saw it. An old photo on the shelf above the desk, faded, bent at the edges. It was me and Drew in high school. We were at some summer lake trip, shirtless and grinning arms slung around each other's shoulders like we actually had each other's backs. He had that same cocky smile, and I looked like I had not yet learned how much could be ripped away. I sank into the creaky desk chair, elbows on my knees, hands rubbing at my face. All those years of trying to earn respect, trying to be the better man, trying not to let the bitterness fester. And now, here I was, sitting in the wreckage of a family that had never really valued me. A father who came around too late. A mother who still thought I was the backup plan. A brother who saw me as little more than a stepping stone to his next win. I did not cry. Not this time. But I felt hollow. And I hated that part of me still cared. When Sabrina came back in, she did not say anything. She just placed a hand on my shoulder and stood beside me in silence. I reached up and took her hand, threading my fingers through hers. "I don't want to fight them," I murmured. "Not anymore." "You don't have to," she said. "But I also can't just keep letting them rewrite the narrative. I can't let Drew twist this into another story where I'm the villain who stole his life." "Then don't," she said simply. "Tell the truth. In your way, on your terms." Her words stayed with me. I stayed up that night, walking the halls of the estate. Every corner held some piece of memory, some good, some sour. Around 2 in the morning, I found myself in Dad's study, flipping through some of his old journals and notes. He was not much of a writer, but he kept records. Letters he never sent, budget notes, even printouts of old emails between him and our family lawyer. In one of them, I found a sentence that stopped me cold.
Ryan's not loud, but he's solid.
I don't say it enough, but he's who I'd want in charge if it all came down. I did not know whether to feel pride or anger. Why had he never said that to me? Why did he only find his voice through paperwork and lawyers after he was gone? But that sentence lit something inside me. Not rage, not revenge, resolve. I closed the folder, pulled out my phone, and began typing. The next morning, I asked Sabrina to help me get a few things moving. I made calls. I contacted the board of Whitmore Logistics. I started reviewing the bylaws. I did not know exactly what I was building toward yet, but I knew I was not going to sit back and watch Drew throw one last tantrum and burn everything down. Because he would. I knew that now. This was not over for him, not by a long shot, but it was changing. For me, I was not going to play defense anymore. And if Drew wanted to test how solid I really was, he would get his answer soon enough. The shift did not happen overnight. It never does. But over the next few weeks, something changed, not just around me, in me. I returned home with Sabrina to our place in Seattle, a penthouse with wide windows and a quiet view of the Sound. It was the kind of home that felt calm, like it had nothing to prove. I remember standing on the balcony that first evening back, watching the sun dissolve into the ocean, feeling something I had not felt in a long time. Certainty. Not certainty about what I would do next, certainty about why I had to do it. Drew stayed silent for about 10 days after the will reading. No texts, no calls, not even one of his dramatic rants on social media. I knew what that meant. He was scrambling behind closed doors, contacting every connection, every lawyer, every family friend who might find a loophole or some shred of sympathy to rally behind him. He had always believed confidence could fill in the gaps where competence failed. But now, there were no shortcuts, no mom to whisper in Dad's ear, no Elise to run to when the lights dimmed. Meanwhile, I began the process of stepping into the role Dad had quietly built for me. At first, I was not even sure I would keep the company. But Sabrina, ever the strategist, said something that stuck with me. You don't have to wear your father's shoes. Just walk the path he paved with your own stride. So, I did. I flew down to meet the Whitmore Logistics board 2 weeks after the funeral. I expected skepticism, doubt, maybe even resistance. Instead, I walked into a room of gray suits and expectant eyes. And the first thing the chairman said was, "You look just like your father when he was young." But I did not feel like him, and I did not want to be him. I told them as much. "I'm not here to make promises I can't keep," I began. "But I won't coast on my name either. I want to understand what this company needs to survive the next 10 years, not just the next quarter." They nodded slowly at first, then, with real interest. By the end of that 2-hour meeting, half of them were shaking my hand. The other half were pulling me aside to quietly say they were relieved Drew would not be involved. Sabrina was right. Dad had left the infrastructure, but now it was mine to shape. That same week, a small business podcast interviewed Sabrina about her newest acquisition. When the host asked about her husband, she did not flinch. "He's the most disciplined person I've ever met," she said, smiling. "He doesn't talk much, but when he moves, things shift." It should not have meant as much as it did, but hearing those words made something tighten in my chest. It felt like someone finally saw the version of me I had always known was there. Beneath the quiet, beneath the years of being second best. The next month became a blur of meetings, plans, and quiet victories. We hired a new CFO for Whitmore Logistics, a sharp woman named Natalie with zero tolerance for fluff and a talent for spotting hidden inefficiency. I let Sabrina consult on operational strategy, though she never overstepped. She was careful, respectful. She let me lead. And the numbers spoke for themselves. Revenue stabilized. Employee morale improved. Within 6 weeks, we negotiated 2 contracts Dad's team had been trying to land for years. My inbox went from ignored to overflowing. I found myself invited to dinners, conferences, and private equity discussions, none of which had ever included me before. But through it all, I stayed focused and quiet. Let Drew make the noise. I was building the foundation. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. I was in the office going over restructuring plans with Natalie. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was Elise. "Hey," she said softly. There was a long pause, like we were both trying to figure out if we were strangers or still something else. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up," she continued. "But I wanted to say congratulations." I waited. She sighed. You know Drew's been difficult. He's taking it hard. He keeps saying you manipulated Dad somehow, or that Sabrina made you do it.
Did she? I asked, my voice calm.
No, she admitted. He can't accept that you actually came out ahead, that you built something without playing dirty. It doesn't fit his version of the story.
That line stuck with me.
It did not fit his version of the story.
Because that was what it had always been with Drew.
A story where he was the hero, no matter how much wreckage he left behind.
And now he had no narrative that could explain this new version of reality where I did not just survive, I thrived.
Elise hesitated. Then, in a quieter voice, she asked, "Can I ask you something?"
I did not answer, but she took my silence as a yes.
Are you happy? I thought about that for a long moment. About Sabrina curled up with her tablet on the couch at night, humming softly while she worked. About quiet mornings with fresh coffee and shared glances across the kitchen. About the respect I was earning. Not demanding, not being gifted, but earning from people who had once ignored me.
Yes, I said.
I am. Elise was silent on the other end.
Then she whispered,
I'm sorry. I know I said gently, but that chapter's closed.
She did not argue. She just hung up quietly.
When I looked up, Sabrina was standing in the doorway holding 2 coffees. She did not ask about the call. She just raised a brow and offered me the extra cup. I took it. Life had shifted subtly but completely. But I knew the calm would not last, because I had just stepped fully into the life Drew believed belonged to him. And somewhere out there, he was rewriting his next move. The only question left was how far he would go this time. It began with a single envelope, hand-delivered. No return address, no note. Just my name on the front, written in the kind of rushed handwriting you only see when someone is angry or desperate. I opened it at my desk the next morning, with a light drizzle tapping against the office windows as Seattle yawned awake below. Inside was a folded set of documents. Photocopies of emails, legal filings, one printed text conversation. My heart rate slowed as I flipped through them. Then, it started picking up again. Drew had been trying to sell confidential Whitmore Logistics client data to one of our competitors. Small time so far. Nothing that had moved past whispers. But the email showed him offering insight on contracts, vendor weaknesses, and private performance metrics. It had not gone through yet, but he had tried. And the worst part was that he was not even smart about it. He had contacted an old acquaintance, someone he used to brag about beating in high school debates. It turned out that guy had climbed the ladder at one of our rival firms. But apparently he had a moral compass and a conscience. He said everything anonymously. He did not want to be involved. But he could not ignore what Drew was doing. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. So this was it. Drew had not accepted the loss. He was trying to sabotage me, trying to poison the ground I was finally standing on, not to build something for himself. That would take vision, patience. He just wanted me to fall. For days, I did not tell anyone. Not Sabrina, not Natalie, not the board. Instead, I started gathering. I traced Drew's communication patterns. I used my old skills in cybersecurity to check where else he might have sent things and what data might have been exposed. I discovered that he still had access credentials that should have been revoked when Dad passed, but someone in our outdated IT department had overlooked them. I quietly fixed the hole. No drama, no warnings, just preparation. Because if Drew was going to play dirty, then I needed to be several moves ahead. The following week, I flew out to New York for a conference. Tech meets logistics. A strange combination, but one that mattered in our world. Sabrina spoke on a panel, but I had a different reason for being there. I met with another company, a startup I had been tracking for over a year. Quietly, I had been considering expanding Whitmore Logistics into something new. Digital inventory automation. Something Dad had never understood. But the world was shifting. Old models were rotting. And this startup was lean, smart, and hungry. All they needed was a strong partner to scale. I made them an offer, not public, not loud, but enough to get their board's attention. If the deal went through, it would put Whitmore Logistics in a position of dominance, not just survival. Control across multiple verticals. The deal came with a catch. We would need to do a full internal audit for legal compliance before they signed off. Standard practice. But for me, it was an opportunity. An audit meant every file, every communication, every ghost in the machine would be exposed. And Drew's fingerprints were all over things I now knew he had hoped no one would ever see. I called Natalie into my office the next day. I want to do a top-down systems audit, I said. She frowned. You mean for the acquisition? That's part of it, I said. But I also want to know who still has legacy access to confidential systems. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You think someone's poking around? Not yet, I said. But I want to be ready if they do. She did not press, because she trusted me now. And then, almost like fate aligning itself, I got another surprise. Sabrina walked into my office later that day with a smile I had not seen in weeks. A smile that meant something had just clicked. We found the missing link, she said, dropping a binder onto my desk. Inside were scanned documents from a property we had inherited, some old development land my father had bought years ago but never built on. He always said it was too risky. But what Sabrina had discovered through a quiet land survey was that the zoning laws had shifted. That land was now cleared for commercial construction downtown, a gold mine. And at the bottom of the folder was a contract between Dad and a company Drew had once tried to start. A contract Dad never moved forward with, one he had quietly buried. He had never trusted Drew to develop it, but now it was mine. It's shovel-ready, Sabrina said. And if you back it through Whitmore, you could double your valuation inside a year. My head swam. Everything was aligning. Power, leverage, visibility. The very things Drew had always thought were his by birthright. He tried to break me 6 years ago. He tried to humiliate me at a funeral. He tried to claw at my foundation when I finally stood on my own. But he did not know what was coming, because now I had more than money. I had proof. I had power. I had a company behind me, a wife beside me, and a name Drew could not erase anymore, not even with lies. I did not want revenge, but I was about to show him something far worse than anger, indifference. And when I executed the next move publicly, he would finally understand what it meant to lose something he never truly owned. But first, I had one last thing to do, because Drew was not going to stop. Not until I made sure he could not. It was all in the timing. That was something Drew never understood. He rushed everything. Relationships, business deals, even his own downfall. But I had spent the last 6 years learning how to wait, how to sharpen the blade quietly while everyone else was still swinging wildly. And now the blade was ready. The internal audit finished ahead of schedule. Natalie and her team turned over their findings on a Thursday morning, and I read them 3 times, just to be sure. Drew's unauthorized access had left a trail clear as day. Data pulls from internal reports, suspicious logins from a private IP. Worst of all, a download of confidential bid information just days before one of our largest contracts was lost to a competitor. That loss had cost us nearly $4 million. The board did not know it yet, but they would. I called a special executive meeting for Monday morning. Sabrina would be present. So would the compliance officer, the company attorney, and the entire board of directors. And because it was protocol to invite all shareholders with past managerial history and a stake over 5%, Drew would be there too. I made sure of it. He showed up 5 minutes late, of course, wearing a too-tight suit and an overconfident smirk. He looked like he thought he was stepping into some casual sit-down where he would get to play the role of misunderstood genius. Elise was not with him. I had a feeling she was finally starting to see through the cracks. Didn't think you'd miss the chance to look important, Drew said, as he dropped into a leather chair near the end of the table. I did not respond. I just nodded to the lead attorney to begin. The attorney cleared his throat and pulled up the screen behind him. A slide titled Security Breach Findings Summary Report glowed in large, clean letters. The room fell quiet as the findings were laid out. Timestamped access logs, flagged IP addresses, correlations with lost contracts. I watched the reactions around the table. Confusion, shock, then anger. And Drew did not blink. Not at first, but the moment the lawyer showed screenshots of emails, his emails offering Whitmore's internal bid numbers to a rival firm, his jaw clenched. "This is absurd," he finally said. "You really think I'd risk everything over that?" The attorney responded calmly. "You didn't just risk it, you executed it. We have digital verification timestamps and traces of the downloads made using your legacy credentials. Mr. Whitmore," he glanced at me, "has already filed for a retroactive internal injunction. Given the evidence we are preparing to notify the state authorities." Drew laughed, but it was thin, brittle. "This is a setup." Natalie spoke then. "You're the only person who still had access through a blind credential link your father left. We caught it. You exploited it." Sabrina leaned forward. "And you thought you were going to sell off his company piece by piece while smiling at his funeral." You really don't know how to build anything, do you?
Drew turned red.
This is insane. You're just trying to wipe me out of the family completely.
I finally spoke. Calm. Steady.
No, Drew. You did that to yourself. I'm just making it official. I slid a document across the table. It was a formal cease and desist order drafted by our legal team, barring Drew from all Whitmore-owned properties communications and internal systems. He was also being referred to state business regulators for corporate espionage and data theft charges. They might not land him in prison, but they would destroy any chance he had of starting a serious business again. His name would be flagged in every due diligence process for the rest of his life. He stared at the paper, then at me. You think you're the better man now? He spat. No, I said simply. I'm just not the fool anymore. He stood, shoulders heaving. This isn't over. You think this is the end. You're still the same silent little ghost living in my shadow. No matter what you do. Then maybe I said, cutting in gently, it's time you stop walking in front of the sun. He blinked, taken aback. That was the last thing I said to him. The board voted unanimously to sever all future association with Drew. His remaining shares, thanks to a clause Dad had added in his final update, were forfeitable upon proven misconduct. And given the report, it was as proven as it could get. By noon, his access was revoked. By nightfall, the press had caught wind of the internal security breach and the swift action taken by new leadership. I gave no comment. Sabrina issued a one-line statement. We protect what we build. Drew, I later heard, tried to get a meeting with one of our former competitors, only to be politely turned away. He had burned too many bridges. And the ones he thought he could buy were owned by someone else now, me. In the days that followed, I did not celebrate. I worked. Contracts were signed with the startup. Our market value rose. Sabrina negotiated an investment partnership with a European firm that gave us presence in 3 new countries. I spent my days building. Not gloating, not chasing ghosts. But there was one final moment that made the revenge truly settle. A letter arrived. Handwritten. No envelope this time. Just a short message on lined paper. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it. D. I folded it once and tucked it into the back of my desk drawer without a word, because I had no interest in responding. He wanted me to come down to his level, but I was already building something he could not reach anymore. And he finally knew it. The fallout came quickly. A week after the board meeting, Drew's name hit the industry blacklist. The startup circles he used to lurk in closed their doors. I did not have to say a word. The documents we had uncovered spoke louder than I ever could. His LinkedIn went dark. Elise moved out quietly, without drama. I knew because Sabrina received an automated change of address alert linked to one of the old shared properties Drew had tried to funnel through their joint accounts. Elise moved back in with her sister across town. I was not surprised. A month later, Mom called. I stared at the screen for a long time. It blinked once. Twice. Then I let it go to voicemail. She tried again the next day. This time, she left a message. Ryan, I don't even know what to say. He's devastated. You didn't have to destroy him like that. He's your brother. No apology. Not even a hint of accountability. Just more excuses. More of the same. I deleted the message without replying. 3 months passed. Whitmore Logistics was thriving. The acquisition was finalized, and with Sabrina's guidance, we rolled out a new digital logistics platform that reduced processing time by 37%. Our valuation doubled. Forbes ran a profile titled, "The Silent Son Who Rebuilt an Empire." I did not care much for the headline, but the truth underneath it mattered. I was finally seen. Not because I screamed, because I stood firm. Drew tried to start over. He moved to a smaller city 2 states over and launched a consulting firm under a different name. It did not last. Word spread. No one trusted a man with a record of corporate theft and a reputation for burning bridges. One of our clients sent me a photo a few months later. Drew was working at a co-working space, hunched over a laptop, wearing the same jacket he had worn at Dad's funeral. Same scowl, too. He was not building anything. He was just trying to stay afloat. Mom stopped calling after that. I think she understood I was not coming back. Not to Sunday dinners. Not to birthdays. Not to the fantasy she tried to preserve. The version of me who accepted scraps was gone. And Elise? I saw her once by accident at a conference standing near the coffee booth with a quiet, distant look in her eyes. She did not speak. Neither did I. But the sadness in her eyes said everything. She had not just lost me. She had traded me
And now the cost had caught up.
That night back at home, I stood on the balcony with Sabrina, watching the city lights flicker beneath us.
You know, she said, you never once raised your voice through all of this.
Didn't need to, I said. She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. You didn't just win. You outgrew them.
And she was right.
For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was standing in anyone's shadow.
I was standing on solid ground,
My own.
and I had built it from the ashes they left behind.
Some men fight for power.